Welcome to episode 10 of the Israel Innovation Show. Today I am here with Joshua Berman. Joshua, thank you for coming on. I'm very happy you're here.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Mark.
Great. So to introduce you, I'll let you do that as well, but I just want to say, so Joshua has been in the field of cannabis for many years, and as a vice president of an organization called CannaTech, which is a platform that brings together entrepreneurs and scientists and investors from around the world. His one of his jobs is to connecting the cannabis ecosystem. So he has traveled all over the world. He knows all the ecosystems, and he's a great source of knowledge for this industry. So I'm very happy to hear more about that. Joshua, you want to start by telling us about yourself
Sure.
and about CannaTech?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, so CannaTech actually is how I started in the space about 6 years ago. And again, in the cannabis space, that is a long time, but it's honestly not too many years. We had started a company called ICANN, or Israel Cannabis, and as a platform, we had a number of different initiatives in the space. CannaTech, which is a global conference platform, was sort of one of our big hits. We run an event every year in Tel Aviv, where we bring together, as you mentioned, the scientists, the entrepreneurs, and the investors. And then what we've done over the last 5 or so years is sort of bring that platform and that conversation to different emerging markets. So there are many different event platforms in the US and even in Canada, many partners and friends of ours. And we've let them sort of keep that space and have gone into, we've done events in Panama and Hong Kong and Sydney, London, Cape Town, and really gone into these new emerging markets, which each one has their own story, or they're obviously at different levels of development, but each one has the core community that's really pushing the agenda and the initiative forward. We are focused entirely on the regulated, legalized markets. I'd say historically that's always been a medical market. Israel, that's a medical market. Europe, by and large, that's a medical market. The US, Canada, obviously things have turned to more of what they call adult use and recreational markets. So we've expanded in that sense, but because we've been, number one, because we're based in Tel Aviv and Israel and operate inside a medically regulated market, our focus is a lot of the clinical trials, the validation, the innovation that comes out of that kind of marketplace that isn't really able to flourish in the same way, whether it's federal regulations in the US or otherwise in other parts of the world. So that's our perspective on how we see things.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of uses coming out of the cannabis plant. I mean, even things like textiles and
sure.
Similar things. I've seen that.
So
is that are the most of these regulated, or are some of these like basically not regulated, or is the whole growth of this plant?
Interestingly enough, it can be regulated from the seeds all the way up. In Israel, as an example, hemp is covered under the same umbrella as the medical system, which we'll get to in just a moment. But seeds are able to be brought in as animal food. So there's all these different sort of games and perspectives and ways of looking at the regulation, but it's all ultimately regulated in the US. Last year, I think it's still only just a year, that they passed the Farm Bill, which allows for the cultivation of hemp. And much of that right now is being used for CBD, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is a sort of anti-inflammatory, a wellness molecule that comes from the plant. Whereas that same harvest can be used, as you mentioned, for textiles, for clothing, for building materials, and the rest. There's essentially a separation. At the end of the day, it's the same genus, the cannabis sativa plant. There is cannabis, which people grow towards having the most robust display of THC and CBD and other cannabinoids and other terpenoids, which we've talked about, and flavonoids, all in that plant. And then there's the hemp plant, which doesn't have the same psychoactive material, and farmers are working towards creating either a plant that grows only CBD without the THC, or they're working towards much more industrial, sort of has just a wider stalk and more fiber, and so that you can do all sorts of other things. The world today, when we talk about cannabis, by and large, is focused on the wellness side or the recreational side. I think the industrial side of where the hemp plant will take us as a replacement to plastics, to biofuels, to building materials, that is an enormous market that is really only just beginning. You have large swaths of cultivation in Eastern Europe, in North America. You yet to have the sort of large-scale ag tech processors to help bring that online. So that's still a slower process, but there's a lot of really interesting innovation over there. And on the medical side, we've really only just begun. The conversation is around THC and CBD by and large. Israel has been the focus for many years for really the initial research and development around the plant. Professor Meshulam, since the 60s, he essentially looked around. He's based out of Hebrew University today. At the time was, I think, at Weizmann. But looked around, and many of his colleagues at the time were studying different opioids and other pain medications. And he sort of looked and fell upon the cannabis plant and said, nothing's doing here. And he got his first samples from the police department, a big cube of hash, I think he says in his story. But since the 60s, he's been studying that. We never had any, unlike North America, we never had any federal regulation that did not allow for research and development. You may not have been able to use it even as a patient or as a private individual, but you could certainly study the plant. And so he discovers THC, or tetrahydrocannabidiol, which is the euphoric effects from the plant. Goes on to discover what we call the endocannabinoid system, which is inside each person, that we have this endocannabinoid system, which obviously fits very well with what we call cannabinoids coming from the cannabis plant. And so a lot of that research and development has been coming out of here, but even we're still just breaking the surface. There's hundreds and hundreds of molecules, what we call minor cannabinoids, and only beginning to study their effects. We were talking about it before we went live, but Professor Meshulam talks about what he calls the entourage effect, which is essentially you have, your CBD and THC. You can isolate those, and there are products on the market where they're completely isolated molecules. But there is this entourage effect that we're still trying to figure out and grapple with, that you just need all of this other sauce, all these different cannabinoids and flavonoids and terpenoids, all of these different pieces together that allow the body to receive and utilize most efficiently the THC and the CBD and other things that are coming in.
But you mean specific?
So it's a
go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
You mean entourage effect means that specifically you need other? Does it mean you have to know exactly which cannabinoids you need in combination, or?
So the formulation. So that's where we are today. I mean, I'd say that people are working on new and unique novel formulations for different indications. We know that cannabis can affect all sorts of different areas, from cancer to inflammation to pain. And it's about honing in on the cannabinoids or the formulations, which ultimately just it could be outside the cannabis plant, but within a cannabis formulation, it's finding the different cannabinoids that are going to target the particular indications that you're going for. And so when we say entourage today, it's really a broad stroke. I mean, there's not enough work going into what each one of the pieces of that sauce does, but we know that even if something is barely represented, it has an important place inside that entourage effect, so to speak. There are other opinions. Again, the more pharmaceutical route, pharmaceuticals are much more excited about single molecule delivery. That's what that kind of medicine, and that's sort of what's kept cannabis a little bit outside to date on the pharmaceutical side, this whole plant approach versus single molecule approach, which is an ongoing conversation in this
Maybe
space.
if I can interject here, because I remember that a few weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago or so, I read an article. Uh, I think it was a professor in Israel who found a new compound that is just may just be as just as important as THC or CBD, like a compound that was not really discovered yet. So
Correct. So
so
that's
there's
actually Professor Mishul. That is Professor Mishulam's work. So he's well into his 80s and still coming out with leading edge research. Um, yeah, the levels and the discoveries on the plant have only just begun. Even when we talk about THC and CBD as an example, and I'm not a chemist, so science is not my background that I bring to the table. But you certainly have those cannabinoids, but you also have even just the acidic versions of those same compounds, and have completely different effects. We've talked about it a little before. Professor Dedi Meiri from the Technion Institute, which is an MIT from Israel, essentially, has been doing research where he'll take the same one plant and essentially extract it in different methods, so that the sauce that you get, again, is coming from the same flower, but it's been extracted in two different ways, and then he'll test those in the lab on different cancers, and you can have completely different effects that he's shown based simply on the extraction. So let alone all of the strains and the different variations of flower that we have in the world today, even just how you then extract it will influence what those formulations, the power of what's on the other side. So there's a lot to figure out. And so
right.
on one hand, there's a if you look at California as an example, and there's some interesting innovation, or the U.S. in general, but by and large, the products on the market are going to be flower, some kind of extraction, and some kind of tincture, and they're very, it might be strain specific or a formulation, but there's very little with scientific background and innovation to validate that process, and that's just because it hasn't been necessary. And there's a lot of groups. There's a group here called Day 3 Labs, which is working on all kinds of different innovation in terms of delivery, so that you can do like a nebulized delivery, which are some companies out there working on. They're working on different ways of taking a plant, which the cannabis plant is a lipid, for example. We talked about the beverage industry as a problem. How do you infuse cannabis into beverages in a more of a recreational market, or how do you create patches with particular onset or length of delivery time? These are all things that we still need to figure out and are being worked on, but are slow to bring to market in that regard.
Okay. Well, let's try to be a little more, even less technical and more specific. We actually just got there, so I'm happy about that.
Okay.
Just to understand it, like so you said innovation is happening right now. You mentioned first in the beginning you said we only scratched the surface of this whole industry right now, or of the possibilities. But then you said, okay, so innovation is happening in terms of formulations. So how to individualize formulations for certain areas to treat certain cancers, or for to control to control the recreational effect, for example. I think you had an example earlier. Maybe you could talk about that as well, about the effect and how, when to sober up, for example. But then also but in the delivery methods, and the extraction methods, you said. Maybe you have, like, for each, you can give like either an example. So either like a company that that's working on something,
Sure.
or something where you just see what kind of innovation do you think we'll see in the next few years that can actually turn into a reality, like in the way.
100%. I mean, without giving a company in particular, but if you take the beverage industry, which is something we were talking about before, there are drinks on the market, and again, not here locally because it's not within our regulations, but in adult use areas in North America, certainly there are beverages now on the market. I'm originally from Seattle, which is a legal state, and they have this 100 milligram bottle of champagne, as an example, which is quite a bit for a little person like myself. But there is really little science that goes into that bottle, other than the way that the cannabinoids are inside the liquid. Once you drink that bottle, you're going to be, stoned, high, whatever the words are you want to use, for an
Intoxicated,
extended
maybe.
period of time. And if intoxicated, there you go. And there's a desire in the industry to create products that are more in line with the way that people live their lifestyle. So if you go to a baseball game and you usually have one or two beers, by the time the game's over, any of that euphoric feeling is gone. You can get in your car and you can drive home. That currently is not really doable in the cannabis space. It just goes until it leaves your body. So there's a lot of work around innovation, both on the bioavailability, how quickly your body receives it and you feel it. So you want that quick hit, so it happens right away. And then you also want to know that, in an hour or two, whatever the time frame is, that it will have essentially left your body and you're able to drive home or do the rest. So
And
there's a lot of work around that.
And you will need the right ways to measure it as well. Like, for
100%, 100%.
Like
no,
for
exactly.
law enforcement, for example, they need to measure it, because it may be in your blood, but you're not intoxicated at all anymore. But we need to measure that somehow,
No, and that's a great point. I think also, so dosage and delivery is key in terms of the innovation that's happening, and it's also key for patients. I mean, at the end of the day, we do live and operate in a medical space, and it is a magical herb for many, many patients. But it's we've seen before patients who would really benefit, but they are either unwilling to, let's say, in Israel's current system, we don't have a lot of these edibles or extracts. They're unwilling to smoke a joint because of the combustion, it burns. They don't know how much they need. One time they take too much, and they don't really get the benefit of the plant because they're unable to sort of take it. There's no one to lead them through that, whether the product's not ready to lead them through it, or they don't have sort of the person at their side to lead them through it. And so hopefully through innovation and new kinds of products, we can really bring them to a patient. They can sort of help themselves move forward in a better way.
Mm-hmm. You did mention a company doing something with facial measuring or something. Can you talk about that?
There's a group. Yeah, there's a group here in Israel that is doing has an app that essentially is able to scan the face and test for different stress, and then can make recommendations for different formulations. I think that's a very unique play in how we get there. I think.
But how would you get these formulations? I mean, is this something then? Is this
well? So that's what's being worked on. A lot of companies are working through different laboratories to work on those formulations. It's funny in pharmaceutical products. It's billions of dollars, 7-10 years of development in terms of getting through those clinical stages. You don't have the same. You have some companies that are treating cannabis in the pharmaceutical way, and they've raised GW Pharma's example. They've raised billions of dollars. They now have a product in the marketplace called Satifex, which can be prescribed by doctors nearly essentially around the world. It's a traditional pharmaceutical. But on the other hand, the way that the system works is there's, in the U.S. at least, there's non-federally regulated legal states that don't require any of that backup. So you can have a great idea and try to put a market into place. It'll be relatively safe. The question is if it's going to be effective. And so you have, Israel's unique, and there are some companies certainly in other places that are unique in looking for that validation and that sort of medical backing, but you don't need the same clinical trials as you have in other scenarios.
Right.
In other industries.
I think you also work with a startup or have a startup or also do. Do you want to talk about that maybe?
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, we have. So at CannaTech we have we've had the opportunity and the honor to really interact with and work with professionals around the world in different communities, and we've spent a number of years trying to build out products or companies in the space that we see as a great opportunity. And so one of those is in is in the ocular area. We built a company called iCanC. We actually licensed the technology from Technion University that uses a nano emulsification um, to help deliver cannabinoids into the eye. And so iCanC will be really one of the first eye drops to deliver. We're still tweaking the formulation. It'll likely be at least initially, it will be a CBD-based product, but there's a opportunity there. We have, and certainly not to get technical. Again, I'm not the scientist, but the areas of the body where cannabinoids attach to are called CB1 and CB2 receptors, and they're located throughout the body. So depending on the delivery and how you, on what you're trying to treat, you're trying to attach to different areas. And in fact, in the eye, and behind the eye, there's a large proliferation of these CB1, CB2 receptors. So it's a great opportunity. It'll be a unique delivery, and we're excited to see that go into the marketplace.
Interesting, and it's not to a specific use right now. I mean, it could be. It could be for
again. It's a catchy subject because you can't do because we haven't done, and you don't need those clinical trials. But certainly, you can only make claims when you have particular trials and testing that are behind you. But we do know that, obviously, from other trials and places, it's an anti-inflammatory. If you look at dry eyes as a serious indication in glaucoma and others, we know that cannabinoids have had an effect in those areas before.
Okay, no. What I mean is the ocular delivery method probably mainly for problems with or around the eyes, or it could
yes.
So it's not like for example when the product is used for pain against chronic pain or things like that, then that's probably not one of the uses there where you would deliver it, or is it also possible that it might be
in general it's looking at different indications that are around the eye, or but certainly there's a way to deliver THC, as an example, through the eye that will have that same euphoric effect that's going to go beyond the eye itself. Neuropathic pain is an issue, possibly in the arm, but certainly also in the eye. So it's looking at both. It certainly hasn't been tested for other parts of the body to date, but it's got a lot of potential, which is what we're exploring now, which is the fun part.
Awesome.
So we're excited to see that.
Great. Joshua, thank you very much. I think our time is about up. Is there anything else? Did you want people to know what you do about CannaTech, about the industry? Are you looking for something, or is just you just gave us a good glimpse into the?
I'm happy to. Well, that's what we do, is we try to share and build up networks. I'm always available if anybody wants to talk or has ideas. We look again for really interesting, innovative companies. There are lots of technologies coming out of Israel, which is again just where I happen to be based, and we work to help bring those to the market in different regions. So I'm happy to speak with anybody where that is relevant. And I would just say, we're only at the beginning. I've been in the industry 6 years. We are just really beginning. You see with the UN and the WHO and global bodies that are starting to begin to regulate. So rather than just have the U.S., Canada, you have Mexico coming online. You've got Australia starting to boom. New Zealand's right far behind. You just have things moving really on a global scale. So there's a wonderful opportunity and an opportunity to bring, a healing plant to a lot of people.
Great. So I think if anyone in the audience, for example, is interested in investing in this industry, contact Joshua, because I'm sure because he's very well connected. If you're an entrepreneur or if you're active in the field, also reach out to Joshua. He's well connected. He might have valuable connections, cooperations in Israel and beyond. So that would be my shout out to the audience. Joshua, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Mark.
And just a big thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.